Welcome, this is your 5-minute geography lesson. We're covering theme 6, element 11, reducing regional inequality. Date and title down in your books. I'm Mr. S and I'll be your 5-minute teacher. Regional inequality can be reduced by investment into deprived areas within the UK. There's been various strategies used in the past which usually include investment, development of infrastructure within a deprived area to try and promote this thing called the positive multiplier effect. So let's get right in and have a look at what that is. Well, the positive multiplier effect is an idea that placing investment into a deprived area will then result in more investment from local businesses, generally private investment, which will then lead to more jobs, more economy, and therefore the entire area starts to improve. So let's have a look at this in a bit more detail. So we've got the idea that this investment is encouraged, or the government has set up a new industry within a deprived area. That industry is going to create more jobs for the local people in that area. That means that then they're earning a wage, which means that they're more likely to have some disposable income. We refer to this as spending power. So more locals have increased spending power, so they're going to start spending in the local shops and the local economy, which then means that the local council has an increased amount of money from tax to develop the infrastructure of the area, improve the image of the area, and develop some more services like bus routes. And then that means that this area has become more desirable, both on an industrial level to encourage more businesses to set up, but also to maybe encourage more people to come and live in the area as well. So this has become a more desirable area, which then feeds back into, well, it's starting up new industry, which means more jobs, which means more spending power, which means improved services. So this cycle is going on and on and on. That's the theory. So let's have a look at it in one example. So if we use the northeast of England, we're going to use Sunderland with Nissan. So Nissan set up in Washington. It created jobs for an area that was seeing high levels of unemployment because of the lack of available industry, because coal mining and shipbuilding had both declined over the last 20 years, and the government encouraged Nissan to set up in that area. It created more jobs, which allowed the local economy to flourish because there was more spending power. But probably what's more important in terms of Nissan builds cars, but it doesn't build all of the things that go into cars itself. So the manufacturing happens within the Nissan plant, but it needs additional things from the local area. So when Nissan set up, there were other companies that set up as well. So there were places that made tyres, that made seat belts, that made the seats and the carpets that went into cars. So when Nissan set up, it also encouraged lots of other smaller businesses that feed into Nissan to set up there as well, which also created new jobs, which also meant there was more spending going on. So you can see that this entire cycle is derived from one investment, which was the government encouraging Nissan to come to Sunderland and saying that they would get some tax relief and some additional support, but then that's allowed other businesses to set up and encourage this positive multiplier effect to continue. Some other things that have happened nationally, well, there's been the Northern Powerhouse scheme, which was a proposal to boost economic development in the deprived areas of the north. So the idea was that this was a national campaign to drive investment into the north and also move some of the key government services further north as well. So instead of basing them all in London, they would be moved further north. Part of the Northern Powerhouse was allowing for improved transport. So you might have heard of HS2, so High Speed Railway 2. And while it doesn't come all the way up to the northeast of England, it does go into the north. So the idea is that an increased amount of mobility to places like Manchester, Leeds area would mean that it would encourage more businesses to perhaps set up further north, because they could commute easier with London, but also allow more people to commute further south as well. And then the idea of trying to encourage more businesses and offices to move their headquarters, their HQs, further north as well. We've seen this probably the most with technology and media. So the BBC, Channel 4 have both moved their broadcasting centres further north. So the BBC's moved theirs to Media City in Manchester and Salford. So this is encouraging more investment further north, where they've always been traditionally centred in the capital in London. If we look at something a bit more local to us, there's been a couple of different strategies that have been attempted. So there's the Newcastle Enterprise Package. So this was governmental and local government support for businesses, so providing cash incentives and tax relief to encourage more businesses to set up. There's the Newcastle Science City, which was a partnership between a couple of different institutions. So there's Newcastle University, there was the EU with their Regional Development Fund providing some money. There was some private sector technology businesses that set up there as well, and the local council. And they've set up in an area of Newcastle that was brownfield site. They knocked it down and they've built new buildings there. So that was an infrastructure project that brought jobs in itself. But the idea is that this is an area of learning and shared communication and knowledge to facilitate advancements in science, with the ultimate goal of encouraging more science-based, more technology-based companies to set up in Newcastle. The Millennium Bridge doesn't sound like an investment scheme. But it is. It was designed as a piece to improve the image of the area on the quayside, but it also allowed the better pedestrian crossing between Gateshead and Newcastle, allowed the flow of people in terms of allowing them to get jobs and perhaps coming over to the other side of the river to spend money in their local shops. And then we've got enterprise zones. So enterprise zones are areas that the government decides are going to get special relief from tax and additional support from the government. They're usually set up in areas that are increasingly deprived and require additional private investment. So these areas are identified as maybe a business park, and the government says that if you start your business here, then you pay less tax. We'll give you support as a small and medium business or as a larger business to grow your company, and it benefits the company because they're going to get some additional support and paying less tax. It benefits the local people because they're more likely to get a job, and it benefits the local council and the government because they're going to get increased amount of tax and pay less money out in social funding for people who maybe are on job seekers allowance and things like that. Well, that brings our lesson to an end, but continue on your own pace by completing the Now Try It tasks for homework. Class dismissed.